Let's go ahead and call the roll.
Senator Case,
Present.
Senator French,
Here.
Senator Ide,
Here.
Senator Pappas,
Here.
Representative Brown,
Here.
Representative Campbell,
Here.
Representative Lean,
Here.
Representative Lucas,
Present.
Representative Riggins,
Here.
Representative Storer, Representative Stibar,
Present.
Representative War,
Here.
Co-Chairman Locke,
Present.
Chairman McEwen.
Here.
All are present, Mr. Chairman.
I think the first order of business is adopting rules. At this point in time, I'd like to suggest that we adopt the standing rules as they are, and I'll have Josh go through what that means.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, under Joint Rule 17-1, there's standard rules which are found in Appendix A of the joint rules of the legislature. And if you don't adopt anything different at this first meeting following the general session, then those standard rules become the rules of the committee. So this meeting would be the time if anyone wanted to change those rules, but otherwise the standard rules will apply. The biggest difference some committees discuss is whether to require a majority of each house. The standard rules do not include that. The standard rules are just a majority of a quorum of the committee to take any action. So that's, I'm happy to answer any questions, but otherwise, if you don't take any other action, those will become the rules of the committee after this meeting.
Any discussion? And do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman. This is Kale.
Yes, Senator Case.
Thank you. And I'm sorry to be appearing remotely. I appreciate the indulgence on this. I've got an early trip out in the morning. But Josh, did this rule provide for co-chairman or chairman and vice chairman? I could prefer the co-chairman arrangement.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Case, yes, the standard rules do reference a chairman and vice chairman. Now, plenty of committees do operate as essentially as co-chairman without formally changing those rules. But some committees, including I think revenue and corporations in the past, have specifically moved to change the rules to remove references to chairman and vice chairman and then replace those with co-chairman. So certainly something that could be done, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, unless there's unless you have a different plan, I'd like for us to have co-chairman, and I would make that motion.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Are you opposing your own amendment?
No, I'm in favor of it.
We must have a delay.
There is a delay, and I'm sorry about that. So
Okay,
I vote aye.
that amendment passes. Do we have a motion on the rest of the rules?
I move we accept the rules as amended with the default.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Well, we've just adopted the existing rules with one change. We now have a co-chairman instead of a vice chairman. Congratulations.
Good job.
I don't know, maybe he might. Yeah.
Well, let's get started then. And I think we're starting out with LSO.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, committee, Josh Anderson with the Legislative Service Office. So this first topic is kind of just an overview of the tax structure, which is, kind of a big topic. So we're going to start pretty high level here with just a couple presentations we've done before. Most of you have all seen this first part as it's part of the new legislator school that we do after each election season. Excuse me. And then we can certainly dive down further and come back with additional information as the committee starts to focus in and ask any questions. But so we'll kind of just start first off, very high level. The first half of this presentation is certainly likely even not necessary, but we'll just run through it real quick, so everyone's on the same page. Most of the tax provisions in statute are in Title 39, starting with Chapter 11 on administration. You can see there on page 2 a list of all of the different types of taxes that are reflected in Title 39. Each chapter is set up in the same way there. So for the most part, almost every chapter is set up as you'll see on page 3. So starting with section 101 would be the definitions, 102 administration, 103 the imposition of the tax, 104 tax rate, 105 exemptions, 106 any licenses and permits, 107 compliance. On to the next page, 108 is enforcement, 109 taxpayer remedies, 110 statute of limitations, and 111 is distribution of that tax. If there is not anything there, usually the section will still be there and it will say there are no specific applicable provisions for this section. So just that's an effort to try to make the tax code a little easier to navigate. On page 5, you can see just some exceptions and highlights to note as you're looking through there, some diversions from that normal structure. So in 3911, 102.1, those are the provisions related to the State Board of Equalization. Chapter 12 on the income tax does not follow that section format because we do not impose an income tax. In chapter 13, there's a section 113 on the monthly payment of ad valorem tax. So that's outside of that normal structure. In chapter 14, each article is a different type of mine product. So you have coal and oil and gas and all of the other mine products listed there. And then in chapter 15 on the sales tax, article 4 is the streamlined sales tax, doesn't follow that same structure. And then article 5 on the sales from remote sellers, again, doesn't follow that same structure, but does impose some tax. Some other considerations on page 6, the alcohol tax is not in Title 39, it's in Title 12. So that's an exception to that normal structure. It's also not structured that same way. And then just some of the constitutional provisions to consider. Section 4, Article 15, Section 4 of the Constitution is related to, and I'll get into this, I think, in the next presentation a little more, limit of 4 mills statewide for property tax. We don't currently impose those mills. Section 11 deals with the uniformity of assessment. Minerals are assessed at 100%, industrial property at 11.5%, all other property at 9.5%, of course. And we passed Amendment A in 2024, which would separate out residential
Hey,
property.
Josh.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question on that. Have we ever imposed those 4 mills, those 4 state mills? Has that ever been the case? I was just curious, having seen that and noticed that we don't do it.
Mr. Chairman, I believe there have been times when it has been assessed. I'd have to go back and study that. I believe it has been assessed in the past, but it's been a long time. I don't think we've done it in any recent history.
Thank you, sir.
And then finally, Section 18, just to mention briefly on the Constitution, Article 15, Section 18 is the tax on income. It requires a credit for all of their taxes paid to assess a tax on income. So that would essentially, it doesn't outright prohibit an income tax, but it would significantly impact how that could be implemented by the legislature. And then over to page 7, we have a couple things that were included in your packet since 1977, and then we have just a list that we track of kind of significant legislation that has passed affecting state taxation, and then a separate document that tracks specific to mineral taxes. Those are in your packets. I don't intend to go through those, but that's just a resource you can find to kind of track historically what we've done, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Wharf.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I noticed there's a whole bunch of chapters that have been repealed. Can you kind of just in a quick broad stroke kind of go over what led to all those? I mean, there's a lot of changes that took place, and I'm assuming that when we repealed sections, they were picked up someplace else. Could you go over that, please?
Yeah, correct, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, as you noted, or as it states, it starts with chapter 11. Everything before that was restructured, I think, in 1997. They repealed all those existing provisions and restructured them starting in the new Title 11. So those repealed sections are gone. You can go back to, I think, the 1997 Green Book, the session laws, and you can track what became what if you need to track back further before that time.
Thank you.
Follow up? Yes, no.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Josh. My question is about the timeline. I was looking at 2020 it's on the bottom of page 10, and it talks about implementations of a 5% statewide lodging tax. It reduced the maximum local lodging tax from 4% to 2%. My question is, did we put in a provision for intrastate travel versus interstate travel?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, no, I don't believe there's any difference. I believe it was discussed, there's some potential issues with doing that, but I believe there were some discussions about that, but it does not make any distinction between interstate or interstate travel.
Follow up?
Ann has one. No, I don't. Oh, no. Okay. Go ahead.
Continue, Josh, please.
All right, I'll turn it over here to Dalton to do the next section.
My name is Dalton Quilty. I'm an associate fiscal analyst with the LSO Budget Fiscal Division. I want to thank Mr. Anderson for his portion of this presentation. This portion of slides will cover the current way that Wyoming collects and distributes taxes, as well as cover recent legislation and its impacts on the collection and distribution of these taxes. So starting on slide number 9, we're looking at the Wyoming tax rates and collections. This slide presents essentially the taxes at a glance, including what the tax is, the tax rate, as well as totaled collections for that tax in fiscal year 2024. Now it is color coded. The green is income taxes. Yellow represents property taxes, light blue severance taxes, purple sales and use taxes, brown for fuel taxes, white for excise taxes on select items, and dark blue for wind generation taxes. Now, Wyoming has no state income tax, and subsequently the green categories representing them show nothing. With a 0% rate for individual and corporate income taxes, the state has no collections in fiscal year 2024. Property tax had a weighted average levy in municipalities of 69.748 in fiscal year 2020, tax year 2024, fiscal year 2025. And the assessment rates for property were 100% for mining, 11.5% for industrial, and 9.5% for all others, including residential property. In fiscal year 2024, the state collected $2.057 billion in property taxes, representing the state's largest tax collection source. And as a side note, of these collections, mining does make up roughly half of all of them. Severance taxes were applied across 5 categories, totaling $748.3 million collected in fiscal year 2024 and representing the third largest source for collections of tax revenues for the state. Gas was taxed at a 6% rate and represented $167.6 million in collections, or 22.4% of total severance taxes collected. Coal was charged a severance tax rate at 6.5% for surface and 3.75% for underground. However, under 2025 session laws, Chapter 31, the severance tax rate on surface coal was lowered to 6% effective July 1st, 2025. Coal collected revenues of $137.1 million in severance taxes for fiscal year 2024, or 18.3% of total severance taxes collected. Oil uses a 6% assessment rate and represents a bulk of severance taxes collected. In fiscal year 2024, it collected $417 million, or roughly 55.7% of all severance taxes collected. Trona uses a 4% assessment rate, and while our largest export, it only represents $23.9 million in severance taxes collected in fiscal year 2024, or 3.2% of total severance taxes. Finally, uranium and all others are grouped together as they have a comparatively low impact on severance taxes, but they are taxed at separate rates. The uranium rate is 0 to 5%, depending on the spot price of the mineral. When it is below $30, the rate is 0. If it's above $60, the rate is 5%. All other minerals, bentonite, sand, gravel, etc., are charged a 2% tax rate. Uranium and all others represented just $2.9 million in collections for fiscal year 2024, or 0.4% of total severance taxes collected. Now, the next category is sales and use taxes, highlighted in purple. It represented the second largest source of tax collections for the state. Sales and use taxes both have a 4% statewide rate, with the option for locals to charge an additional 0 to 3%. Sales taxes collected totaled $1.199 billion in fiscal year 2024, while use tax collections totaled $123.7 million. Lodging taxes, which are also included in this section, totaled $63.8 million, and they use a statewide 3% base rate with options to add an additional 0 to 4%. Our next category, highlighted in brown or tan, is fuel taxes. There are 2 categories within it, both taxed at 24 cents a gallon. They are gasoline as well as special fuels. Special fuels would be diesel, propane, natural gas, all that other kind of stuff. And the total collections for the state was $169.3 million from these fuel taxes.
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
On the sales tax, you have it listed as 1,199.5 million. Is that equivalent to $1 billion?
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
The white category represents excise taxes on select items. These are separated into 4 distinct categories and totaled $39.6 million for taxes collected in fiscal year 2024. We have cigarettes, which are taxed at 60 cents a pack. Tobacco products are taxed at 20% of wholesale price or 10% of retail price, plus an additional 60 cents per ounce for moist snuff. And with this, if you do not pay the wholesale tax, you'll pay the retail tax on the back end. Electronic cigarettes and vapor material are taxed at 15% of wholesale or 7.5% of retail price, kind of the same thing with the other tobacco products. And liquor represents 53.5% of the excise taxes on select goods and collects from license fees, excise taxes, and up to 17.6% profit on liquor sales of wine and spirits. Now, our final category, represented by dark blue, is the wind generation tax. It's set at $1 per megawatt hour produced, and the tax actually only takes effect 3 years after the turbines first begin producing that electricity. In fiscal year 2024, this represented $4.4 million of collections.
Representative Ling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming today. My question is, on this list of taxes collected, I don't see anything to do with gaming, nuclear, or solar tax. Could you walk me through some of that?
I would have to look into the separate tax rates and send you an email on those. I do not have any information on the gaming tax rates, unfortunately.
Representative Worf.
Is that not reported to the Department of Revenue?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Worf, the gaming tax rates. I am unsure on that. I will have to check in on that as well. The department may be able to answer that better, though.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, I believe some of that is because most of that is a local resource rather than a state tax collection as potentially part of that, why that's not included in this list. But we can certainly dive into where those funds go and report that back to the committee.
Please. Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your information. So do we assume then with nuclear and solar that we don't tax that? Or is there information out there? I think it would be really interesting for the committee to have that in the picture.
Mr. Chairman, for those two, we do tax nuclear, but I don't believe any current nuclear production going on to be taxed. But when those do come online, I believe there's a tax structure in place. We can put that in front of the committee. I do not believe that we tax solar energy production. So that's not taxed right now.
Go ahead, continue.
Excellent. So looking at slide number 10, we have contributions of various taxes. So this is essentially just detailing what we just went over in those separate tax rates. It helps to visualize the impact of different tax collection sources on the total revenue collection. A bulk of collections come from ad valorem or property taxes, seen here in blue. These were the sections colored in yellow on the last slide. A distant second is sales and use taxes and lodging taxes, highlighted in purple on the previous slide, but shown in gray on the pie chart. The third largest source is from severance taxes, highlighted in light blue on the previous slide, but now orange. The fuel taxes represented in brown on the last slide are the fourth largest. They're seen here in yellow, representing 4% of total collections. And the final category includes excise taxes on select goods, as well as the wind generation tax, and represented just 1% of total collections for fiscal year 2024. Now, moving on to slide 11, we have introduction to issues of imposition. What this slide is trying to answer is how Wyoming levies or imposes its taxes and tax policies. Generally, the basis of all Wyoming taxes falls into three categories: volume-based, or tax based on the volume of a good sold or used. Examples of this would be the fuel tax being charged per gallon, the wind generation tax being charged per megawatt, or the cigarette tax being charged per pack. The second category is an observable transaction or event, essentially when goods are bought or sold. Think of sales and use taxes being charged when an item is bought, or severance taxes that are charged when a mineral is extracted or severed from the ground. Certain property taxes are also based on the buying of the home and the value then. The third and final category is imputed value. Imputed value is an assumed value given to an item when the actual value is not known. Things like property, be it residential, commercial, industrial, or agricultural, have an inherent value even though we may not know exactly what it is. We use assessment rates to assign values to these in a standardized system and impose taxes based on that value. Another example would be in producer processed natural gases, which due to its extensive processing, depending on the type, leads to much lower taxable values than the original products. Our next slide, slide number 12, distributions, where it all goes. So knowing the tax rates and the different strategies Wyoming uses to collect its tax revenues, it is now important to understand where the revenue goes once it is received. Each tax has its own distribution, generally found in section 11 of each tax article. Some are simple, like all liquor taxes going to the state's general fund. Some are very complex, making use of multi-step formulas to determine where the money goes, like distributions of severance taxes or property taxes. Commonly used variables for these distributions at the local level include base payments, population, point of sale, land area, miles of road, area wealth, and historical data. We'll be discussing a few of these more complicated formulas in depth. Now, on slide 13, we're going to be looking at ad valorem and property taxes. This is a flow chart. Ad valorem taxes, unlike many of the state's other revenue sources, are not collected, pooled, then distributed. And therefore, this flow chart shows the potential imposition of property taxes as opposed to the real distribution. Counties may not impose more than 12 mills plus any mills necessary for debt repayments. Cities and towns may not exceed an 8 mill limit plus any mills necessary for debt repayment. The school foundation program receives revenues from a statewide 12 mill tax levy. Local school districts have a 6 mill county levy and a 25 mill mandatory level, with optional levies for programs like adult education and recreation and any additional mills necessary for debt repayments. This, along with the 12 mills received by the school foundation program, constitutes the 43 mills that go towards schools and funding them. Community colleges have a maximum 10 mill limit plus any mills necessary for debt repayment. And finally, special districts have a variety of limitations in place depending on the type of district, with maximum mill allowances for any given district being between 1 mill for things like museums or water conservation districts to up to 12 mills maximums for flood control. The bottom of the graphic lists a number of the special districts as well as their maximum mills allowed to levy. Statewide, the average mill levy was 68.504 in tax year 2024. And this is the, yes, sir, through the chairman.
Chairman,
Representative Stivor.
back on this flow chart, it says community college max 10% limit plus mills necessary for debt repayment. But I'm looking, and this is for 2024, 3913-103. What I'm looking at, what I've got, it says operating levy not to exceed 4 mills with the vote of the people. Wyoming statute 2118-104, plus a deal approved by the board. That's only 5. So can you give me, oh, never mind. I see it, 10 mills, Wyoming statute. Or second. Yeah, with the vote approval, there's the 10 mil max. All right, thank you.
Statewide, the average mill levy again was 68.504, and this is the arithmetic weighted or average, excuse me. The previously discussed statewide average was actually weighted for how much we're collecting from different sources. So that's kind of the two discrepancies with those numbers. Slide 14 is going to be
Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this data. So kind of a quick question. Is it accurate to say that the kind of the mills that are already fixed and there's no votes on them is the 63? So if you look at the 43 for the schools, you look at the 20 for the county and the cities. Are all of the other mill levies, do they all require a vote? Which ones of those don't require a vote of the people and which ones do? If you could just summarize that, I think that would be helpful to understand which ones are available in the absence of a vote and which ones aren't. I mean, some of them clearly are, but I just wanted to understand that picture a little clearer. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and I don't know if I have a complete answer for you. We can certainly get that. Some of them do require a vote of the people and some do not. And I don't know that we have that tracked down, but we can certainly put that together and get it to you guys. Because some of the hospital mills, I know it's like a portion of those are some they can do, and then some require a vote of the people. So, and I think each type of special district is different, but we can certainly summarize that and get that to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, guys. I would appreciate kind of a good summary of that. I think it would be a good picture for us to be able to understand that a little bit clearer. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Excellent. Starting on slide 14 again, we're looking at severance taxes and the flow chart for fiscal year 2025. Now, severance taxes are paid to the state of Wyoming by extractive industries for the privilege of removing, extracting, severing, or producing any mineral. The imposed rates are, as previously covered, between 2% and 7%, depending on the mineral. Total collections in fiscal year 2024, again, were $748.3 million. Of the 2 to 7% severance taxes levied, 1.5% of it are guaranteed by Article 15, Section 19 of the Wyoming Constitution to be paid to the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund. In fiscal year 2025, it is estimated this amount is $165.1 million. There's also a statutory 1% severance tax imposed. This amount goes towards the Leaking Underground Storage Tank Program, also known as the LUST, as well as towards the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund and the Common School account in the Permanent Land Fund. The LUST is equivalent to 1 cent of the fuel tax, or estimated at $9.3 million in fiscal year 2025. The other portion is calculated as an amount equal to 2/3 of the constitutional 1.5% severance tax and is then split equally between the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund and the Common School account in the Permanent Land Fund. Both will receive an estimated $55.1 million from this portion of distribution in fiscal year 2025. Now, severance taxes below the $155 million cap are then distributed based on a percentage of the total $155 million that they should receive. The lion's share, 62.26%, goes to the general fund. The 3 water accounts receive 15.05%, cities and towns 9.25%, the highway fund 4.33%, counties 3.88%, the county road construction fund 2.9%, and the remaining 2.33% goes to cities, towns, and counties' capital construction funds. Once the $155 million cap is reached, and it has as long as this distribution has been going on, funds are distributed until the total reaches $402.2 million, with 2/3 going to the budget reserve account and 1/3 going to the general fund. Due to recent legislation repealing the budget reserve account, beginning in fiscal year 2027, this whole amount would go to the general fund. And I will be going over an updated flow chart that reflects that change. Once severance taxes are above that $402.2 million cap, funds are distributed evenly between the general fund, the budget reserve account, and the school foundation program, with each receiving 1/3. Again, with recent legislation, this has been greatly simplified, and in fiscal year 2027, everything above the $155 million cap will be distributed to the general fund. Our next slide, sales and use tax distribution, is another flow chart. The sales and use taxes are both levied at a statewide rate of 4%. Sales tax is levied on the sale, transfer, or exchange of a taxable item or service, and use tax is collected on the storage, use, or consumption of a taxable item or service where no sales tax has been paid. Sales tax is applied when both a buyer and seller reside in the same state, whereas use tax applies to purchases made outside of a state's taxing jurisdiction but still used in the state. State sales and use taxes are distributed, with counties receiving 31% and 69% being distributed to the general fund. Of the portion distributed to counties, a 1% administration fee is distributed to the general fund, leaving counties to distribute to counties and to cities and towns based on population. License fees and interest are paid to the general fund, while any penalties applied are paid into the county public school fund.
Quick question. So we're looking about $243 million generated off each 1% sales tax.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Representative Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you tell me the license fees, interest, penalties in the county public school fund? Do you have a balance for that?
I do not have a balance for that. The license fees and interest are the kind of license fees that you are collected if you're a barber, a doctor, sort of paying to those licensing boards. And then the penalties would be any penalties on not paying those. But I do not have exact figures. I can get those if you'd like.
Don't forget grocer. Okay, thanks. Continue.
Now looking at slide 16, this is actually the major legislative changes to some of these collection rates. There were several recent pieces of legislation that changed the rate or the way the distributions were made. They include 2025 session laws, chapter 31, Former 2025 House Bill 75 coal severance tax rate, which reduced the tax rate on surface coal from 6.5 to 6%. That's effective July 1st, 2025 or fiscal year 2026. 2025 Session Laws, Chapter 92, former House Bill 33 vehicle sales and use tax distribution. Highway Fund amends the distribution of sales and use taxes on motor vehicles and trailers. Sales and use taxes collected on the sales of motor vehicles and trailers during each fiscal year, beginning in fiscal year 26, are to be appropriated to the Highway Fund for the operation, maintenance, construction, and reconstruction of state highways, estimated to be $69.2 million in fiscal year 2026 when it takes effect. Finally, we have 2025 Session Laws, Chapter 63, former Senate File 168, Budget Reserve Account Repeal, which repealed the Budget Reserve Account effective July 1st, 2026. Over-the-cap distributions currently sent to the Budget Reserve Account will instead be distributed in the general fund. Now, slide 17 is the beginning of those updated flow charts. So the first one's going to be sales and use tax distribution. This is the updated flow chart reflecting fiscal year 2026. It shows the expected change to the estimated sales and use tax distribution from the new way motor vehicle and trailer sales and use taxes are distributed. Really, the only difference between this flow chart and the last one is that addition of the highway fund on the right side, where we're now appropriating from the general fund. Our next slide here is going to be severance taxes flow chart updated for fiscal year 2027. So as previously stated, this is an updated severance tax flow chart reflecting the repealing of the budget reserve account beginning in fiscal year 2027. And as seen by the updated chart, it has simplified the severance tax distribution quite a bit by allocating anything over that $155 million cap to the general fund. And our final slide, slide 19, is going over other revenue sources for the state. Taxes aren't the only source of revenue for the state budget. We receive revenue from several other sources as well. These include investments in income on the private Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund and pooled income, totaling $600.9 million in fiscal year 2024. We also receive federal mineral royalties, $588.6 million in fiscal year 2024. About half of Wyoming estate is owned by the federal government, the mineral estate. Private producers pay the federal government for the right to mine on federal lands. The federal government then provides the state of Wyoming a payment in order to reimburse the state for services like infrastructure or emergency services. The common school land account represented $205.1 million in collections in fiscal year 2024. And the state of Wyoming holds a number of lands for the purpose of school funding. This land is leased out and the incomes are remitted into this account. We also have agency-specific collections, fees, charges, things like hunting, fishing licenses, occupational fees paid by doctors, dentists, barbers, grocers. And we also receive federal funds, which are also agency-specific. Most come in the form of categorical grants for specific things based on population, but we also receive competitive grants where multiple states are contending for the funding. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. I would stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
I do have one question, and you guys are probably going to have to run it down for me. But on the gambling taxes and fees we collect through the lottery and everything, how much of that actually goes to the school system? And where does the rest go? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we will have to chase that down and we will send a follow-up email. And would you like that sent to the whole committee?
Most definitely. Thank you. Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the sales and use taxes, how much does that increase each year? It's 4%, but how much does that increase? Because everything costs more, so you're paying more on sales tax. Do you have a number on that?
Through the chairman, Senator French. I do not have an exact number, but I can get that to you.
Yeah, the whole committee, please.
Yes, sir.
Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two questions actually, and one may seem very basic, but common school land income, how much land are we talking about here? Ballpark, any idea?
Through the chairman, Representative Lucas, I don't have a ballpark number. I can chase that down in terms of acreage. Is that what you're looking for?
State lands will have that, Mr. Chairman, and we can find that quickly and send that to the committee.
Thank you. Follow up?
Yes, is somebody keeping track of all of these things that you guys are going to look up for us? We appreciate you so much. I do have one other question that is unrelated. Thank you. For the increase in sales tax, I think it would be interesting if you could do that over a 3-year time span, just so that we could see the effect of all of this inflation that we've seen and its effect on the state's income. Would that be possible?
Through the chairman. So you want the sales tax over the previous 3 years and kind of the inflation? Yeah, that should be doable, and I can send that to the entire committee once we create it.
Thank you.
Representative Wharf.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would also like to request, you have fees, charges, et cetera, agency specific. I would like to see a total there. And I would also like to see the federal funds, how much federal money is coming in. And I'd like that listed, both those requests by the specific agency that's getting that. Thank you.
That should be possible. Some of the agencies we might have to track down just because of the way that grants and funding works. That is the agency specific funding, but we should be able to do that.
And I do appreciate that this is a large ask, but I think it's important for us to understand how much money is actually coming in and how that money's coming in, because all that helps run the state, whether it's money going to the state, to the counties, to the local cities. So I would appreciate seeing that. I'm intrigued. I'm always interested in what the federal government's buying. So I would like to see that. And I understand it's going to take some time, but I would like a complete listing of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If there's not any more questions on that portion, Mr. Chairman, there was one other presentation we had provided to you. It was one we had done for this committee a few years ago that I just quickly updated. As we're pulling that up, I don't intend to expend a ton of time on this one. Just for some background for the committee, as we kind of talk out over how the taxes are structured for Wyoming. This talks about the constitutional provisions that impact taxation. Most of those are found in Article 15 of the Constitution. And this just lays out very brief descriptions of those, mostly as a resource for the committee. Certainly, if you have questions about any of those, it's something we can dig into, depending on what those questions are. But you'll see just overall that most of these provisions actually deal with property tax. And when the Constitution was set up, property tax was essentially the only tax that was assessed in the state. So over the years, that's changed a little bit, but most of these sections are specific to property tax. So Section 1, assessment of lands and improvements. All lands and improvements shall be listed for assessment, valued for taxation, and assessed separately. And Section 2, assessment of coal lands. All coal lands from which coal is not being mined shall be listed for assessment, valued for taxation, and assessed according to value. Section 3, taxation of mines and mining claims. All mines, mining claims shall be taxed in addition to the surface improvements, and in lieu of taxes on the lands, the tax shall be on the gross product as may be prescribed by law, provided that the product of all mines shall be taxed in proportion to their value. Section 4, again, this is the state levy that we discussed earlier. The state's limited to 4 mills, and as noted earlier, that's currently not being assessed. Counties are limited to 12 mills in Section 5, and then Section 6, cities are limited to 8 mills. You'll see there that there has been a court case on they have to use those 8 mills to pay for any primary or essential function of government. So to the extent that a special district could be set up, if that was a essential function of a city government. They could not use a special district to fund that. They had to fund it out of those 8 mills. Mr. Chairman, on to the next one, section 11. Again, this is one that we're all fairly familiar with, the uniformity assessment. Yeah, yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Who decides what a primary or essential function is?
It's a little bit of a a historical look back. There are a couple of court cases that have kind of outlined that. So, for example, fire services were one that were a primary function of the city. So the city couldn't use a special district to fund those fire services, even though they do have a fire special district out in the counties, because that was not a primary function of a county government. So that was one example. Can certainly send you some of the cases that that outline that a little bit, but that's mostly been decided in the courts.
Okay, thank you.
So section 11, Mr. Chairman, this is one, uniformity of assessment, uniform valuation of property in 4 classes now, with the passage of Amendment A, minerals, industrial property, residential property, and all other property. Ag property is valued at the capability of the land to produce. The legislature cannot create new classes or subclasses of property, and all taxation is required to be equal and uniform within each property class. Section 12.
Real quick,
Mr. Chairman, yes.
on that Amendment A, does that restrict us to just owner occupied as the 4th class?
Mr. Chairman, it's residential property is the 4th class, and it would authorize the legislature to create a subclass of residential property for owner occupied. So there could essentially be 2 classes of residential, owner occupied, and then all other residential.
But are we?
But you don't have to do that, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. Yes, you could just have it just be all residential property.
Okay, thank you.
But if you wanted to further subdivide, you could do so.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I reviewed section 11 of Article 15, I didn't see anywhere in here that full value was defined as replacement cost new, which I know our CAMA system uses to define property taxes. So I'm curious if you can point me directly to the rule or to the law change that drove us away from full value as defined in the Constitution.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, I don't know if I know exactly when that happened. I do know that the Supreme Court has looked at the current CAMA system, and when it was challenged, I don't know, in the early 90s, I think, and they said that it did comply with the constitutional requirements. So there was a case on that. Now, certainly that doesn't mean that's the only type of valuation system that could comply with the Constitution. But I could certainly track back and see when that CAMA system went into place. And I know the department tomorrow, I believe, will talk in depth about how the CAMA system works, and they might have some of those answers. Continuing on, Mr. Chairman. So, go ahead.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Josh. Yeah, back to that section 11, Article 15. There's language in here in subsection B that says all taxable property shall be valued at its full value as defined by the legislature, except for agriculture and grazing lands, which shall be valued according to capability of the land, what it can produce. Commercial property would fall into that category too, I know, because a lot of times, you've got three ways to value a property. One's a market approach, one's a replacement cost approach, less depreciation, and then you have an income approach. What's your comments on there? Why it's just specifically said agriculture, why it specifically says agriculture in there instead of commercial or industrial if it's an investment property? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I can answer that question, but yeah, it certainly does just specifically call out ag property as that capability of the land to produce. And then it's kind of, as you noted, it's, full value as determined by the legislature for those other class, for everything else. So as to the extent industrial property is specifically called out there, certainly that's something that the legislature could look at to change that valuation. So on Article 15, Section 12, page 7, that's where the legislature is authorized to provide exemptions from taxation. Certain property is defined to be exempt, and then such other property as the legislature may by general law provide. Over to page 8, Section 15, state tax for the support of public schools. That's the 12 mil school statewide tax for schools, and then 6 mils for the county. Those were changed in 1981 following the Washakie decision. And then that amount was further changed in 2006 for the county school levy. Articles 15, Section 16 just requires that all fees and taxes on vehicles to be expended for public highways, county roads, bridges, and streets and alleys, and the expense of enforcing traffic laws. Section 18, again, this is the tax on income. It just requires that a full credit be allowed for any other taxes if you were to impose an income tax, which would significantly it would make a significant impact if there were any effort to impose an income tax in Wyoming. Section 19, this is the mineral excise tax. It's the 1.5% tax that Dalton just discussed, that's dedicated to the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund. And then Section 20 was added in 2006 again in response to some of the school litigation. And that actually just authorizes the legislature to create inviolate funds for higher education. On to page 11, just some other provisions that have an impact on taxation outside of Article 15. There's Article 15, Section 28. Taxation requires the consent of the people. You'll see the title of that also references uniformity and equality of taxation, but that is no longer included in that section following the 1988 amendment, but that title was not changed. Special and local laws are prohibited, and taxes and exemptions are both specifically listed as items that cannot be done through special legislation. Article 3, Section 33 provides that all bills that raise revenue need to start in the House of Representatives. Article 7, Section 9 just requires the legislature to implement taxes necessary to provide for a thorough and efficient system of public schools. And then just one more page, Mr. Chairman, equal protection. Go ahead.
Real quick. And I'm not suggesting we do this, but as I read the Constitution, education is supposed to be provided for 3 years between ages 16 and 21. And we kind of just skip that part and say it's K through 12. I'm just curious, is there another place in the Constitution that allows us to get around that, or do we just ignore it?
Mr. Chairman, I have to look into that a little more. That's certainly, and they may have gotten into that in some of those Washakie and Campbell County decisions of the court as to what an appropriate education is.
Those darn legislators wearing black robes. Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along the lines of education, talking about Section 16, it does not mention education in the Constitution that our vehicle fees, our taxes and licensing fees go to education. But when I'm reading the state data book, specifically on page 43, it tells me that motor vehicle taxes fund education. Could you walk me through that change?
I'm not sure I know that one, but I can definitely try to track that down. So what, can you repeat that, please, Representative Lee?
Mr. Chairman, page 43 of the data book, it talks about motor vehicle fees and taxes, funding education to the SFP account. But then section 16 of the Constitution does not mention that any education may be funded by those fees.
I will track that down, Mr. Chairman. There may be some swaps that are happening there or something, but we can certainly follow up on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen. Regarding, when you look at Article 12, and it talks about when properties are primarily used for government purpose, et cetera. So do we have an assessed value for vacant school-owned properties, vacant county-owned properties? Example, where the property was purchased a long time ago for a library that was never built and it stands vacant. Do we know how you guys assess those values to keep track of it? And when they are vacant like that, is there taxed on that when the properties are actually vacant and have been dormant for years?
And Mr. Chairman, I might defer to the department or if there's any assessors here, but I believe it, to the extent they're supposed to be exempt to the extent they're used for a governmental purpose. So if they're sitting there vacant, that may be a question. And of course, we had that recent court decision and action by the legislature to make some of those state lands exempt, pending a discussion that this committee may have at a future meeting. So those government lands certainly a topic of discussion, but I think I might have to defer to the department if they have any further knowledge on that, or if there's any assessors here.
Bother to assess those properties on an annual basis and then just set it aside.
I believe if the assessor believes they are exempt, they do not value them. Now, again, if they do think that there's a question where they're not being used for governmental purpose, then they may go ahead and assess those properties.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Continue.
All right, so there's some other provisions that are can sometimes impact our discussions related to taxation. Equal protection, which is found both in the Wyoming Constitution and the United States Constitution, and then the Interstate Commerce Clause, which gives the federal Congress the power to regulate commerce among the several states. So again, that type of discussion could come in if the tax affects out-of-state commerce more than in-state commerce.
Real quick question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
As I understand that interstate commerce clause, basically, does that mean we can't tax Utah more than we tax people in Wyoming or South Dakota?
Mr. Chairman, generally, yeah, it makes it, if you need to have a tax that applies essentially equally between in-state commerce and out-of-state commerce or interstate commerce.
Thank you.
There are some.
There's always some.
Yeah. Then finally, Mr. Chairman, you'll see a timeline on the next page. So you'll see the property tax was imposed essentially before statehood, and at statehood. The sales tax wasn't implemented until 1937 at a rate of 2%. In 1965, it was increased to 2.5%, and then again to 3% in 1967. In 1969, the severance tax was implemented. In 1989, we have the current property tax rates that were implemented in response to the constitutional amendment at the time in those three categories of mineral taxes at 100%, industrial property at 11.5%, and all other property at 9.5% in those had not changed since that time. In 1993, we got the 4% sales tax rate, which is the current rate. And then, of course, in 2024, we have Amendment A, splitting off residential property into its own class, but currently still taxed at that 9.5%.
Senator Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that severance tax, Josh, in 1969, you don't have a percentage. What was the initial percentage of that severance tax in 1969? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I know that rate. I can definitely go back and track that down and let you know how that's changed over time.
Follow-up? Continue.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, and the final thing is just a map of the states and when they had imposed their income tax, and you can see that Wyoming is one of several states that does not impose an income tax. And then again, they're referenced, as we discussed earlier, those two tables that LSO tracks just major changes to taxation and mineral taxes. That's the presentation, Mr. Chairman. I'd take any questions.
Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for this great data. I want to take us back to section 11 on Article 15. And I just want to go through this, and this constantly comes up, and it's going to come up several times, I think, in the meeting in the next 2 days, and probably every time we meet. But when you go through this, there's a lot of discussion on the fact that all taxation has to be equal and uniform. So we get into that conversation all the time. And at the same time, there's numerous clauses and statements in here as per the legislature's discussion. So can you kind of go through in detail where, so when we stay in section 11, there's one set of rules, and then we use this section 12 for the exemptions, where we sort of, for lack of a better term, skirt those rules just a hair. That being said, and I think the Constitution probably gives us that, but can you get into kind of the specific wording that continues to come out to say, listen, if you don't, all taxation shall be equal and uniform. I mean, I see that in section D in there, but again, I think even there, it talks about the legislature shall or prescribe such regulations that shall, secure just validation. Where are the words in here? Can you walk through the words that constantly come out that push back and say, hey, you can't, caps are not valid, things like that. Can you work through that and just walk through the words and just how that's constantly knocked down, for example?
So, Mr. Chairman, and we'll go into this tomorrow a little more as we talk about any future additional relief that might be looked at by this committee. This section, as far as I can tell, is unique to Wyoming, and there's not a lot of case law interpreting what it says. So, I think, as you noted there, there's maybe several ways to read it. You read it, of course, all together. But then also, there's different ways to interpret it. One of the ways that we've had issues on for since the idea of a cap is, would that create a subclass depending on how it's applied, or assessment value? Would that create subclasses of property? And again, I'll go through a memo tomorrow that will talk a little bit about some of those questions. But really, the issue is that this language just hasn't been widely interpreted. So when we're advising about, are there concerns with a piece of legislation, we're more just providing a warning of this could be an issue that could come up in a court. We have no idea how the court would decide it. We have no idea if it would be challenged, but here are some language you can point to in this section that someone could use to try to argue against a certain piece of legislation. And it's really specific to each piece, but we're not trying to say the legislature can't do it or shouldn't do it, just advising of potential issues that may or may not arise. That was my presentation, Mr. Chairman. I take any more questions or?
Good job. Thank you.
Yep.
I think at this point in time, we're going to take about an 11 or 12-minute break.
Mr. Chairman, I think Representative Storr had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Storr.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Anderson, maybe just as a follow-up question to Chairman Locke's. I'm just curious about Article 1, Section 28, and the fact that the title still refers to uniformity and equality, but we took that out in 1988 because we created the separate classes. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's my understanding, yes.
Thank you. But at the same time, we still have Section 15 or Article 15, Section 11 that does talk about uniformity and equality. So I guess that's the question for the courts and how to interpret that. Is that how you would think about that?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I would think so. Yeah, again, I have a little bit of language in one of the memos we can talk about tomorrow that talks about what the court has said a little bit, but I think they talk about whether the tax results in essential fairness, I think is the phrase the court used.
Mr. Chairman, one more follow-up.
Follow-up.
If I might. Thank you. And then I guess seems to be another issue that folks have brought up when we look at Article 15, Section 12, and the word such in describing what the legislature can do. So it gives us some examples and states and such other property as the legislature may by general law provide. It doesn't say and other property, it says and such other property. So do we have any case law that interprets that language to date? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storr, not to my knowledge, I can certainly do a little digging and see if there's anything that's talked about that. But not to my knowledge, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, I got a quick question on slide 6, just property values. Take industrial property. So just let me pick something large, say just say a refinery. So because those are manufacturing facilities, I mean, are they treated differently? Because there are some exemptions for that. So in general, how would they assess value of those large properties? And they're very high dollars. So I'm just curious what the process is.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Riggins, again, I might have to defer to the department or to any assessors that might be here that would have more knowledge of that property assessment process.
That's all. Thank you.
Any more questions? Once again, thank you, Josh. At this time, we'll take a break till 10:55. All right, let's bring up the Department of Revenue.
Good morning, Mr. Co-Chairs, members of the committee. My name is Matt Sachet. I am the Administrator of the Mineral Tax Division, and I am the Interim Director of the Department of Revenue. As most of you know, recently, Director Henson has recently retired. When I mean recently, I mean yesterday. So, and I am the Interim Director in her stead. We are going, I can assure you that we are going at the department to do everything we can to uphold the standards that she set. I have provided each of you with my card. That's my direct line along with my direct email. And we've also forwarded hers. So if you wish to use her email or her phone number, it will be forwarded to me and we'll be able to help you out. If you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And if not, I will send this to the subject matter expert, Mr. Fanning, and later on, Mr. Gill of the property tax.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Brett Fanning. I'm the Excise Tax Administrator at the Wyoming Department of Revenue. Sincere congratulations to Interim Director Sachet. So we're excited to have him on board. He's got a wealth of knowledge, been with the department for decades. And so we're excited to have him leading our ship. Mr. Chairman, in front of you, I believe LSO handed out a memo that I had drafted a few weeks ago in preparation for this meeting. This topic of conversation is related to electronic noticing. And this was one of the topics that was brought up as an interim discussion topic and was on your list of topics to discuss. This is one, it was very interesting with this topic. And just like all of your constituents who are business owners also reach out to me as well. And this memo is kind of the summation of those discussions that we've had with constituents, that we've had with directives from this committee and LSO staff as well, and in collaboration with now former Director Henson. This memo, you're going to see, I'm not going to go through it word for word, but there's a couple things in here that are fascinating. And I know many of you have heard me outline some of these topics before, but there are some real fun and interesting topics in this memo that I do want to go over. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll kind of walk through my memo and go from there.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, electronic noticing. And when Director Henson and I went through our statutes, and specifically in Title 39, so all of our taxation statutes, there are numerous references to sending notices via postal mail. When we really dove into the details of that and the notices that we send out from our system across our various tax types, it was the guidance at the time from Director Henson, former Director Henson, that let's start with these excise tax statutes first. And as you'll see in here, the amount of mailings that come out of our system that I send out to your constituents and your business owners on a monthly basis is just incredible. And so as of right now, Mr. Chairman, we've got about 50,000 vendors that are licensed in our system for sales tax, tobacco tax. Obviously, we've just heard from LSO that especially in the excise tax division, we administer a bunch of other taxes. But in the excise tax division, as far as licenses, 50,000 vendors. And it's really staggering because I did go back and look at a presentation I'd given to this committee a few years ago. And in 2015, we had 16,000 licenses, 16,000. And then in 2019, we had 26,000 licenses. And I specifically chose 2019 because that's when there was some United States Supreme Court decisions in, I don't want to say regulating, but licensing of remote sellers and marketplace facilitators. So think really large online marketplaces. Now we're at 50,000. So within the past 10 years, we've had triple the amount of licenses that our staff are working on licensing and helping them collect taxes so that we can pay for services that you and I and everyone listening here, everyone in the room use every single day. So 50,000 licenses. Out of the 50, I'm just going to use 50,000 because it does fluctuate. I checked this morning and we are back over 50,000 licenses. Does it surprise anyone that over half of those licenses have mailing addresses not in the state of Wyoming? It's really intriguing, and it goes back to this United States Supreme Court decision in Wayfair versus South Dakota, where now there are licensing requirements if you meet certain thresholds pretty much in every single state that has a sales tax. And that's generally going to be 45 states. So if you have a sales tax, most states now require you to license if you meet certain thresholds. The legislature a few years ago made those thresholds here in the state of Wyoming $100,000 in sales. So if you're an out-of-state company here in Wyoming, or an out-of-state company not in Wyoming, but you sell more than $100,000 of products into Wyoming in a year, that requires a license. And once upon a time, there used to be a transaction threshold. And per guidance from the streamlined sales tax agreement, the streamlined states are moving away from the transaction threshold. If you sell 200 pens into the state of Wyoming, do we really want you to go through licensing with our office? Or are you looking for more regional partners to make sure they're collecting on bigger ticket items? So 53% of our licenses. So when I send mail, this is mailing addresses. Half of that mail is going somewhere besides the state of Wyoming. Does it surprise anyone that 9% of the mailings that we send, so 9% of the licenses in our system, I send mail to one address in the state of Wyoming? One address. And it goes back, this is truly, Mr. Chairman, for another discussion, but there's one address. Director Henson and I, we were talking about trying to budget for mailing costs, and we thought about putting these mailings on a liquor truck and sending them up to that one address in Sheridan, just really to cut down on costs there. Again, it's for another discussion, but 9% of the mailings that we send for the licenses are going to one single address. And so that's over 4,000. 4,000 of our licenses have the exact same mailing address. The Department of Revenue also sends correspondence notices to foreign countries. And you can see we've got just under 1,000 of those. 2% of the licenses that I administer are actually outside of this country. Primarily in Asia, and that can be for another topic of conversation, really outside of electronic notices. But per some of the statutes that we're going to discuss here going forward, yes, we are sending mail overseas and to other countries. So continuing on to page 2, our excise tax system, completely different. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I'm just curious, with that huge increase, what are the majority of those businesses that account for that huge spike in excise?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, outstanding question. It's related to online sales. And here's kind of the general scenario. In the state of Wyoming, we require you to get a license if you're a remote seller. So you meet this certain threshold to sell into the state of Wyoming. There are a lot of businesses throughout the world, clearly, that want to use Wyoming's sales tax exemptions and then have another company report the sales tax on their behalf. So the vast majority of those licenses are primarily requested to claim a wholesale for resale exemption. It's actually a really interesting online search. If you Google things like Wyoming sales tax online arbitrage or reducing sales tax burdens in Wyoming and just various searches. And I've actually had my staff research these as well, where you have companies that are from online, maybe overseas, maybe out of state, that are requesting a Wyoming sales tax license so they can provide it to suppliers to purchase wholesale for resale. And then having marketplace facilitator statutes where the actual online company who collects your payment is going to be the one who collects the tax on your behalf. So you've got companies that are claiming wholesale for resale exemptions. That's the only reason they want a sales tax license. It's not to collect tax to send to each one of your communities. It's primarily to utilize our exemptions. So, Mr. Chairman and Representative Campbell, in anticipation of that question, I did run some fiscal notes. I'm not going to say fiscal notes. I did run some numbers where I looked at our December 2024 filing period. I chose that one, and you'll see in a lot of my presentations, I do choose December because that's when all of our monthly filers, all of our quarterly filers, and all of our annual filers have to report to us. And so in the December timeframe, we had 14,000 out of our 50,000 that didn't report a single dollar in sales, not even tax. So 29% of our licenses don't even report a single sale to the Wyoming Department of Revenue.
Follow-up?
Do you have any recommendations on how we can weed those guys out in order to reduce the cost of all these mailings and everything? I mean, they're taking advantage of us. Is there any way we can weed through those folks?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, thank you so much for the question. This legislature has started kind of step one of that process, and it was House Bill 197 from a few years ago. There were several pieces to this bill, but one of those was to remove voluntary licensing from the state of Wyoming for sales tax purposes. This was epic for our division, and it gave my staff, the Department of Revenue staff, really purpose, because nowadays we are licensing folks who are going to collect and report sales tax and maintain compliance with us as well. That was kind of step one. And it was something that was an interim topic several years ago as well. That was kind of the first step. There's a follow-up to your question, Representative Campbell, where the state of Wyoming is a member of the Streamlined Sales Tax Agreement. And they have a requirement where there's no validation or checks for if you're going to register for a Wyoming sales tax license. So let me illustrate that a little bit. If you submit a Wyoming sales tax license application to the Wyoming Department of Revenue, just via our own internal system, our staff is going to do some due diligence to see if you actually need a Wyoming sales tax license. The Streamlined Sales Tax Agreement has a completely different requirement where they will give you a license almost no matter what. But Wyoming's part of the Streamlined Sales Tax Agreement. And it's really it warrants further discussion because we don't have any administrative rights for those streamlined sales tax licenses. Now, there are some definite pros to being in the streamlined sales tax agreement. So outside of streamline, step one has already been taken to kind of weed out it, in your words, Representative Campbell. And then the Department of Revenue is still navigating how that's applying to the streamlined sales tax agreement. But for the ones that come directly to us, we've got a lot more due diligence because we no longer have to give them a license just because they want to utilize our exemptions. So.
Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fanning, back up just a little bit. You said that a large percentage, and I didn't write it down, reported no sales. And I just want to clarify, is that no sales in Wyoming? Or no sales anywhere?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lucas, outstanding awareness. That is no sales in Wyoming. No sales in Wyoming. So I did have those two pieces. So 14,000 out of our 50,000 reported $0 in sales into the state of Wyoming. Those are our licenses where the implied function there is that you are going to collect sales tax and send it into the state of Wyoming. There's also, and there's overlap in these figures, and you'll see why. There was 17,000 and change that submitted no tax to us. So the first one was you didn't have any sales into the state of Wyoming, 0. This one is you may have had sales, you may not have had sales, but most of our licenses, 36% of our licenses don't send us a dime in tax. Again, and there's kind of carryover in those numbers, but you've got some folks who don't report any sales to us, but then you've got a lot of licenses that maybe don't report sales, but maybe they report sales and they've exempted them due to our exemption in our statutes. And there's nothing right or wrong with that. That's not my role. It's just there's some exemptions, or maybe a lot of what they do isn't taxable in a variety of forms. So a lot of our licenses, if there's a kind of a center point of this discussion right here, is a lot of our licenses are not reporting any sales and they're not reporting any tax. And Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, that's kind of this, try and condense this down a little bit. In a presentation I gave a few years ago, I showed this chart of exponential growth of our licenses, and this has really leveled off, primarily based on what House Bill 197 and a lot of the questions that this committee has already asked. So.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fanning, thank you for that information. So 2 questions. First off, the 14,000 of 50,000 and then 17,000 of 50,000, there's overlap on that, right?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lucas, yes, ma'am, there are.
And then my second question, Mr. Chairman, how is it advantageous to the state to have so many thousands, tens of thousands of licensees who do no business in our state and remit no sales tax dollars to us? So are we making a lot of money on licensing fees, and how much is that? Because I don't see the point otherwise.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lucas, yes to a lot of those. And these are discussions that we've had over the last several years. And House Bill 197 is a direct result, at least that piece of it. Our license fees are a one-time $60 license fee. And so you've got to do a lot of math there. It's also important to note that if you register through the streamlined sales tax agreement, they do not have to pay that license fee. So again, I do want to reiterate, there are several pros to the streamlined sales tax agreement. This is just one that really is very interesting for the state of Wyoming. There are 24 states in the streamlined sales tax agreement as well, and Wyoming is just one piece of that.
Do we have an ability to track who just isn't paying taxes? I mean, they report no sales. Is that probably the case, or are some of them just not filling out their form 41-1? Thank you.
Yeah, of course, Mr. Chairman. The vast majority of these ones we're talking about have no Wyoming sales. They are going to purchase something without sales tax from a supplier, likely in another state, using a Wyoming exemption, and then having a very large online retailer collect the sales tax on their behalf. The way our statutes read, you don't have to report sales that are going through a online marketplace. And so the vast majority of these legitimately do not have sales. Now, this is going to be a topic of discussion down below where they get the sales tax license and then they don't maintain compliance, which means you've got to fill out a Form 41 if you have a license with us. And that's where some of this electronic noticing comes into play.
Just glad I remembered the form number. Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Fanning, and I really appreciate this. So this is just the naive guy up here. So you said that for these license fee, there's a one-time $60 fee. So not annually, a one-time fee for this license. And in many cases, they don't have to pay it. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, yes, that's accurate.
Senator Ide and then
Thank you.
Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fanning, always good to hear your testimony. Just to hit on the one-time fee for the sales tax license, and all of those going to, 4,000 of them going to one location in Sheridan. The reason for that is because they have a registered agent in Sheridan, I presume, and they're having to pay, an annual fee to renew their LLC. Is that correct? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, yes, always a pleasure speaking in front of this committee and yourself. That's an outstanding point, and this requires clarification. The Wyoming sales tax license is a one-time $60 fee. The Wyoming Secretary of State's office has an annual reporting requirement to maintain your LLC. It's my understanding that is also $60, but that's a per annual fee. The reason it's generally $60 is because it's based on an asset reporting requirement. And since most of the LLCs that we see, again, don't want to speak for any other office, they don't have any assets nor connection to Wyoming for that fact. Yes, it is a registered agent in Sheridan, and a lot of out of state and really out of country businesses try and claim Wyoming residency by saying that they have an LLC that is in Sheridan, Wyoming.
Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fanning, so you said that these businesses are claiming an exemption from sales tax. What kind of exemptions could that be? I'm just curious to know. And then could you just elaborate? You said that $60 one-time sales tax licensing fee, but if it's through the streamlined sales tax agreement, they don't pay that, right? Just clarifying.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lucas, yes. The second point of your question, yes. If they go through the streamlined sales tax agreement, there is, in the vast majority of cases, no $60 licensing fee. And then for the first part of your question, which exemption are they claiming? It's a resale exemption. And so they are providing Wyoming exemption certificates with Wyoming information all across the world, is what we've been told, claiming that Wyoming resale exemption because Wyoming offers a sales tax license. Offering the sales tax license generally gives you the ability to purchase wholesale for resale. And so it's primarily, not all though, it's primarily wholesale for resale.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Fanning. Just kind of, do you have any numbers? If we're getting $60 a license, but then we've got half of these people are not paying anything. How much is it costing us for postal delivery with our outgoing, how much money are we losing on this program? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, yes, we do have those figures. And I believe that I did put our postage costs for last fiscal year in this memo. It looks like it's number 9. And so last year we spent over $100,000 on postage costs. $100,000. And with the price of stamps continuing to go up, obviously we can do some math there to see. The $60 license fee, I do have that in our annual report. I won't pull it up for right now, Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, but I do have that for you. If we're going to license a couple thousand a year times $60, then you can do some math there to kind of see where we get to.
Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, this may not be an important question, but just talking about that address in Sheridan, it's my understanding that they function in some cases as registered agent for a lot of these businesses. Is that what they're doing? I know there's a push, and maybe this is stepping outside of the bounds of this group, but I know there's a little bit of a push to verify registered agents or put some limits on how the registered agents work. That affect this in any way? What's your perspective on that, or have you looked into that? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, yes, there are efforts outside of this committee, and Senator Case would have some insight on that as well. But from the Department of Revenue's perspective, the registered agents aren't the ones that we're having the concerns or the considerations with and trying to get them their notices. It's really those businesses that we're looking at here. So the Department of Revenue, we have worked with registered agents in the past, just trying to verify some items, but it's really those businesses that are being represented by a registered agent.
Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen. I mean, all your vendors already do electronic. They do the reporting by electronic, correct? Or isn't that the standard procedure, or do they not do it like that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, thank you so much for keeping me going down my memo. I appreciate that. So on page 1, on that second bullet point, again, I looked at December 2024 for the reasons I outlined. About 7 out of 10 are going to do all of this electronically. 7 out of 10. Then 19% are going to file what's called a simplified electronic return. And I don't think a lot of folks are familiar with this, and it is new to a lot of folks as well. It is a streamlined requirement that we have to accept simplified electronic returns. We call them SIRs. And it really is, simplifying here, computer language that's sent via a website that gets into our system. And then our system actually categorizes it into a Form 41-like format. And then it comes exactly like how we're used to seeing it in our system. So it's a streamlined requirement, although a lot of taxpayers will have third-party preparers actually use this SIR format. Once it's certified by Streamline, certified by our state, then we have a lot of taxpayers outside of Streamlined as well that actually like using this format. If you're computer savvy, I've heard, and I'm the one who works on the certifications, that it's very user-friendly. And that format is the same across 24 states. So that's another option. So we've got 3 options for your constituents, your businesses in your areas to send in tax dollars. 1, through our electronic Wyoming Internet system for Wyoming Internet Filing System for Businesses, our WIF system. 7 out of 10 do that. Then we've got another percentage that file SIRs, these simplified electronic returns. And then we've got 10 to 15%, it varies, that file hard copy returns, which means the Department of Revenue is going to send you a form each month, quarter, or year and say, hey, fill this out and get it back to us by the deadline. So that's our mix. We've got 7 out of 10 that file electronically with us. And it's been a priority of mine and former Director Henson's to try and boost that number for reasons that are outlined in this memo.
Chairman.
It's tough to see y'all at the end. Sorry about
That's all
that.
right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kind of two things. Do you think that you would improve compliance? I guess I'm thinking like this, the people that are filing hard copies, are they checking a box and that's how they want it? And versus, they're just expecting that notice every year in the mail and that's the reminder. So if you had electronic notices, would that, encourage them to electronically report themselves just because there's that reminder? And I'm just wondering if it would improve your compliance reporting.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, I love the question. A lot of these 10 to 15%, 12% my memo filers, they just want to do it in hard copy. They're small business owners. IT equipment can be complicated. It can be unuser friendly to them. And some people just still like writing it out. During the COVID time, there was a push among a majority of states to try and get more electronic filing. Because to your point, Mr. Representative, filing electronically does tend anecdotally to increase compliance. Because then you're not relying on postage costs and making sure that the minimum wage employee at the front desk got you the return, and just for a variety of instances. In general, electronic means does increase compliance, but this is why this suggestion or this thought process in this memo was, if you still want to report hard copy to us, to the Department of Revenue, and you're going to have constituents in every one of your areas that does, this will not affect them. This will not impact them. They can still file hard copy. A lot of states have tried to reduce and for good reason, quite honestly, postage, variety of reasons, but this thought process will not impact those folks who still want to do it hard copy.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Mr. Fanning. I find your knowledge fascinating with the excise tax. I have 2 questions. The first being, do you anticipate an AI assistant to help you to be able to navigate those that are in non-compliance in the future? And the second, is there a timeline by which we revoke the license if they don't file within compliance?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, the first one on AI. Former Director Henson and I discuss this because we see it pop up in our Gmail nowadays. We see it pop up in online searches. Right now, we are not anticipating using AI at the Department of Revenue, at least for licensing and noticing as far as that respect. It's not something we'd rule out in the future, but right now, AI, we are not using it at the Department of Revenue, at least in the Excise Tax Division. Second, does that answer your question? Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, the second one, revocations, yes, absolutely. There are numerous timelines in statutes for revocations. I'm going to simplify it. It's about a 6-month process. It requires at least 2 notices per statute. The Department of Revenue sends out an additional one. A notification saying, hey, you've got a severe notice of delinquency. You could be sent to external collections. We send a first intent to revoke, a second intent to revoke, and then actually a third and final revocation. You can no longer operate with a 30-day appeal right. And so even if I revoke one, I was doing, unfortunately, revoking licenses before I came up here yesterday, there, from the department and our administration, there are numerous notices for you to come into compliance. And as always, the Department of Revenue does have means in statute to help you through those hard times if you are a business.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up question. Do you have a number about how many we revoke annually? And is there a communication process by which other vendors know that that license has been revoked?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ling, I will get you the number that I revoke annually. And when I say it's the Excise Tax Division. There's really a 3-step process on the final approval. I had revoked 50-ish before I came up yesterday. So I'm going to say just general, because I'm the one who does it, it's going to be several thousand a year. But I will get you an exact estimate of what I did last year. So. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Outstanding questions. Thank you all. So over 100 different notices that get generated out of our system. And I put in here 147. That's the exact number that I calculated a few weeks ago. And these range from anything and everything you could think of. The vast majority of them are non-compliance notices. And so you've got failure to file letters. So again, if you don't file your Form 41, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to send you a nice reminder saying, hey, did you forget this? And then I'll send it again. And that's just one of the notices. Audit assessments, payment plan defaults, penalty waiver request. I mean, the list goes on. There's 147 of them. And all of these are sent via postal mail. So on page 2 of my memo, as I've outlined, we do send hard copy returns to all of our paper filers. And that's something, at least with this thought process of this memo, the Department of Revenue wouldn't look at changing, because we know that there are folks that rely on hard copy notices that come via postal mail. Along with those returns, we also send out hard copy. We do a quarterly taxing issues newsletter, gives you legislative updates, tax rate updates, common questions, et cetera, et cetera. So we do send those in hard copy if you are a paper filer. So you're starting to maybe see a trend here where if you are a paper filer in our system, we're going to have all the correspondence still go to you in hard copy. That includes your return. That includes any notices that you have. It includes our taxing issues, which is really important to make sure your constituent businesses in your districts are charging the right amount of sales tax. All right, we also mail out monthly account statements to hard copy filers if you have a credit or a debit with us. So if we owe you money or you owe us money, we're going to send you out a statement. The reason being is because if you don't have access to our YF system, you have no way of knowing. And we don't want, here at the Department of Revenue, we don't want surprise notices. That's not something we would want either. And so we try as a service to our customers, if you're a hard copy filer or you don't have YFs, because there are some SIR filers who don't have YFs, we still want to make sure you're aware if there's something either way on your account. Now, that is not a statutory requirement. That's not one, but it is a customer service that we do provide. And so just something to outline there. I'm on number 7 now in my memo. So a few years ago, this was a huge update. It just really was. We have this YF system, and if you're a YF's filer, it allows you to submit your returns. It allows you to make payments. It allows you to see past returns. It allows you to see past payments. It also allows you to do various account maintenance. And so the Department of Revenue's vision is that we've already got the system built for the most part, is we have this depository for all of your notices. If you already can see your payments and your returns, this is something the Department of Revenue, and we're already migrating this way as it is. It's just some of these items we're going to discuss here are just legislative updates that could really put that into full gear. In number 8, my bullet point number 8 in 2023, We had IT programming to actually send you an email when your return was available if you're a WIFES filer. That was new. I know that seems just a few years ago, and it was, but now if you're a WIFES filer, you're going to get an email reminder from us saying, hey, make sure you sign into WIFES and file your return. And that was game changing to reduce the amount of failure to files, because there are a lot of taxpayers and businesses who they're the best auto mechanic you can ever think of. They're the best IT programmer you've ever seen. They're the best hotel in the smallest town in your district, but bookkeeping's not their specialty and they just forgot. And so that's something, but having that email reminder was extremely helpful. And so just we're making strides there. We are, because we know that electronic means are the way the majority, even per our license count, correspond with the Department of Revenue. So in summary, and there's some statutes down here, just updating some of the via postal mail to even written notice would be game changing for your constituents and businesses around the state of Wyoming. A lot of times this happened before I left, where a business had gotten a failure to file notice with us and they'd taken care of it via WIFES. They'd taken care of it. And so they got this notice that said, hey, I didn't file. But then they actually filed. And so there was just this cross in the postal mail. Again, it was really no one's fault, because when we'd set the notice, yeah, there wasn't a return in our system, but it was just that crossing paths there that would really alleviate a lot of the correspondence that we see kind of each and every day. Mr. Chairman, it's possible that there could be IT programming for this as a one-time cost. I did just want to put that in my memo. We've done some of these things through our recent maintenance contract, but I just wanted to make a note is without funding, this isn't an overnight thing, even if any statutes get changed. But the Department of Revenue is still just trying to get into the 21st century, is still trying to make these updates. Last thing in the summary, with this approach, so making our current YF system more of a depository as opposed to just being able to see returns and payments and do account maintenance, nothing would have to change with our hard copy and our CER filers. They're still going to get written notice if your hard copy and CER filer is in the postal mail. But if you're a WIFES filer, the thought from the Department of Revenue is that we send you an email saying, hey, go check WIFES. You have a new notification, just like you do in your banking world and your cell phone world and fill in the blank. We had originally considered sending emails with a notice kind of as an attachment. And former Director Henson and I, there's just some security concerns there. There's taxpayer information. And I wish the email addresses in our system were really good, but it's all voluntarily reported information, including contact information. And so there's a little hesitancy there in sending confidential documents as an attachment rather than saying, hey, go check WIFES. You've got a new notification in there, which has got several checks as far as who can access that WIFES account. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm more than happy to go through some of these statutes if you would like, and just provide some thoughts. I don't know if that's appropriate, but I'm certainly, but that's kind of where we're looking at with electronic notices. So with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Yeah, let's go through the statutes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. So the first statute is 3915-102. And as you can see, it says notices required to be mailed by the department under this article, if mailed to the address shown on the records of the department, shall be sufficient for the purposes of this article. This is a fascinating statute. The reason being is because this statute says, hey, if we use the mailing address that we have on file and we didn't get returned mail back, that shows that we delivered it to you. That's what this statute's saying. Hey, if we use the address that you provided us and we didn't get returned mail back, and since I said return mail, I have to let you know that we do these bi-weekly workload reports. And the vast majority of the work still to do on folks' desks is return mail, because we're trying to send it overseas, we're trying to send it out of state, and we're also trying to send it to registered agents throughout Wyoming that have different documentation purposes or different procedures on how they make sure their companies get their correspondence. So even outlining something as far as like written notice by the department using contact information provided by the taxpayer, or just kind of something along those lines, because we want to make sure if a business, we want to make sure they're still getting their written notice somehow, some way. But we will also want to have confidence that they received it and we're not getting returned mail back. So then carrying on to page 3, Mr. Chairman, this is our failure to file requirement for postal mail. When I was looking on March 12th, which was when our last failure to files went out, thousands, I actually lost count of how many failure to files that we had. Because remember, again, in March, we give you a lead time. We certainly do. And then we start sending notices out of our system. And so these notices were all for all those monthly, quarterly, and annual hard copy filers who didn't send in a return, even though they were licensed with us. And you'll see in that section, it just says written notice by mail. And just even having written notice there, then we could use our YFS platform, or if there's any other thought process there as well. The next one, 3915-107B, Roman at 9. This is when the department does jeopardy assessments. Very rare. I don't even think I've done one, Mr. Chairman, since I've been in my position, but it is in statute. It's if there's just non-compliance or various reasons where we're gonna charge you some tax. There is another by mail requirement there. So any sort of written notice or written notification. The next one, 3915-108, this is also another failure to file statute as well. And so I'll read this statute because they're very similar. So if a vendor fails to file a return as required by this article, the department shall give written notice by mail to the vendor to file a return on or before the last day of the month following the notice of delinquency. So now you've already gotten 2 months to make it right. If a vendor then fails to file a return, the department shall make a best information available, which will be prima facie correct, and the tax due therein is a deficiency and subject to the penalties and interests as provided by this article. So this is saying, hey, we're going to give you a couple chances to file that return. If you don't file the return, the Department of Revenue is going to use the best information available to submit a return on your behalf, which is also another notice that goes out to the taxpayer. So if you fail to file your return, we're sending you multiple notices. Then we're going to send you something that says, hey, we're submitting a return on your behalf, which again has appealable rights and a transition period to make sure you file that return as well. 3915-108B, Romanet 16. Notwithstanding this statute, if any vendor or taxpayer is 150 days more delinquent on this taxes, has not entered into a formal payment plan with the department, and after 30 days notice provided by first class mail, the department shall post the name of the vendor or taxpayer, their sales tax number, physical address, and the unpaid balance on the website. We do this. We most certainly do this. If you go out to the Department of Revenue's website We do have a link on there that says delinquent taxpayers, delinquent vendors. It's important to know, we have internal conversations about this all the time. So as I mentioned to Mr. Chairman, to Representative Lean, it's about a 6-month process. And so by 150 days, the Department of Revenue has already done something. And I say that kind of with air quotes. And so really within this 150 days, if they haven't gotten into a payment plan, they're well on their way to a revocation. And so this statute, the 150 days, and they're not into a payment plan, you're going to look at that list and you're going to say, wow, it doesn't look that bad. But it's only active vendors who are more than 150 days late who are delinquent on their tax. And so there's a real big gap there. There just is. And I'm not saying that's just context for this statute. The statute is, again, talking about electronic noticing here. But this is one, I actually put it on our website last week because one of my managers was out of the office. But it is something. There is a remedy in statute where, hey, if you're delinquent, your name could go on our website. But again, if you take a look at that list, you're going to say, Brett, all this stuff you're telling me doesn't look that bad. That's the why there. So, and
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Mr. Fanning. If they enter a payment plan, does the interest still keep accruing for that payment plan, or is that stopped at that time?
Mr. Chairman, it does continue to accrue. There have been cases, depending on an extenuating circumstances, the Department of Revenue and myself, we do have the ability to waive interest and or penalty. We cannot waive tax due in statute. If there are some sort of extenuating circumstances, or maybe the interest is more than the tax actually due after years and years, the department can waive interest and or penalty. That said, interest does continue to accrue if there are no extenuating circumstances.
Quick follow-up. And the penalty is 10% and the interest is 18%. Am I correct on that?
Mr. Chairman, right now, I'm gonna have to fact check myself. Right now, the interest rate's about 12%. It is very high. It's important to remember it is a statutory requirement. It's a interest rate, prime interest rate, plus some percentage points. It's about 12% right now. The penalty is generally going to be 10%, but we have a variety of different penalties that are actually in our excise tax statutes, but 12%, and for the majority of the case, it is 10%.
Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fanning, do you have an estimate of the delinquency rate or the amount of taxes that are past due? And then my follow-up question would be then, do you have a loss rate, a percentage that you just have to write off?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lucas, several questions there. Let me know if I forget some of them. Yes, we do write off delinquent accounts, and we would be able to calculate a loss rate. We would. I'm the one who generally has the final approval on write-offs. The second question is, how much tax is due right now? I checked this morning because I anticipated receiving this question. So thank you. I put in a presentation, I believe it was last year, Mr. Chairman, that our unpaid tax balance in the excise tax division was $40 million. Today it was right around that mark. So we're still consistent. Those are liabilities that are on an account. It includes interest, tax, penalty that is owed to the excise tax division. Most of those, to your point, Mr. Chairman, Representative Lucas, are more than 120 days delinquent. So the chance of us collecting on those is very low. The Department of Revenue does hire an outside third-party external collection agency. If we've tried everything we can't do an internal payment plan, The vendor for a variety of reasons just can't. Then we do unfortunately send accounts to our external collection agency. They take a fee, and that's in statute as well, but we do send accounts that way. So I will be able to, with your third question, I think I got them all, be able to get you a delinquency rate as well. And you would be surprised to say it's probably higher than you think as far as compliance. Mr. Chairman, you and your business and other business owners on this have probably never heard from the Department of Revenue. That's probably a fact. You've been in business for 10, 20, 30 years, and you've maintained compliance the whole time, and you've never gotten a single hard copy notice to us. That's very real. That's very recent. But it's these percentage points where the non-compliance really gets up high.
Actually, Mr. Fanning, I did get a notice. On my Form 41. I didn't check a block or fill something out properly. I was amazed that they took my money and then sent me a notice telling me to refile the form properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, to kind of bring it back in this discussion, it was probably via mail, correct? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last two ones, and it truly, thank you, committee.
Representative Lucas.
Thank you. I wasn't loud enough about my desire for a follow-up, so I'm looking at your list of delinquent vendors. Just it looks a couple of weeks old there. Pretty good. And there's a number of them that are outside of the United States. Most of them, I have to tell you, are not big dollar amounts, but the ones outside of the United States do tend to be a little bit high. I would expect that your chance of collection on those is far less than it would be for a domestic vendor.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lucas, yes, ma'am.
Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would it discourage vendors? I'm talking about out of country applications. Would it discourage vendors from doing that? Maybe not beneficial for us, maybe. If they had to have a registered agent to do that or a valid US address, regardless if they're out of the country or not.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, that's a phenomenal question. It really is. The majority of the notices that we send to our registered agents, they're really going to get there. The registered agent, again, has a duty in some other areas of our statutes to collect that information. And make sure their businesses get it. It is the requirement that may be missing, maybe not, for businesses to have something else in Wyoming or some other valid address that the Department of Revenue can verify. So the registered agent, our instances, they're really pretty good on making sure their businesses at least have access to their own portal to get those notices. It's just an additional due diligence, at least in our sales tax, our excise tax statutes, to verify where we're going to send something. If it comes through not a streamline registration, it comes through the Department of Revenue, we're going to do some due diligence to make sure we've got valid contact information. Now, the out-of-country ones, as of a few years ago in House Bill 197, these are dwindling in our list because the legislature decided that voluntary licensing just to get an exemption maybe was something that needed to review, and it did. So now it's just monitoring or reviewing or somehow reaching out to vendors via Streamline who are out of country and making sure they have a good contact information on file with us. The foreign vendors that are going to have a registered agent in Sheridan or Cheyenne or Casper or Pinedale, that mail can get there. It will, because it's going to go to a Wyoming address. It's when they have a foreign address that the Department of Revenue, we're pretty good at verifying addresses, But some of those ones in the Middle East, that's where we have some limitations. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Fanning. We'll open this up to public comment on either this morning's topics or this one. No takers. We'll have to spice this up this afternoon. Okay. Anybody online? Okay. Well, I guess we're about 30 minutes ahead of schedule. So we'll move into lunch. And we'll adjourn until 2.